Hey everybody, Zee Garcia here, and welcome back to Unsung Gems. This is a little video series in which I talk about a handful of games which I think are very clever, very interesting, but don't seem to garner a lot of attention. And today we're going to be covering a few games that begin with the letter B, okay? So I've got 5 games lined up here, and we are going to kick it off. As always, if you have some interesting games that fall into this B category that you feel are underrated and don't get a lot of attention, mention them down in the comments below. Same thing for if you have played these and what you thought of them. So, let's engage in a little discussion down there in the comments. But other than that, let's go ahead and get started. My first pick for today is a game called Los Banditos from Reiner Knizia. And yes, it falls under B because Los just means the, okay? So we're going to ignore that part. And this one is a re-implement, or is basically based on a very popular Reiner Knizia game called Battle Line, or Schaden Toten, same game. But this one's a dice game in which you are going to be trying to race your opponent to 10 victory points. It's a head-to-head game. You are going to put some tokens out on the table between the two of you, and then you will reach into a bag, draw a couple of dice, roll them, and assign them to these 4 tokens out there. The tokens have victory point values. There's 1s, 2s, and 3s, I believe. And you are trying to make combinations of dice. There's a ranking of combinations. So, for example, 3 of the same color with the same number, that's very strong. And then maybe you have one in which you have 3 of the same number, but the dice are different colors, right? And all these things are ranked for you so that you know when you win or you lose something. So that's it. Once you win a token, you collect it. You will set up the next round by putting out new tokens, throwing all the dice in the bag, and doing it again. It's very quick, certainly faster than Battle Line, and it is a little lighter than Battle Line also. It just it feels a little less stressful than the original. You don't feel there's that sort of tension in Battle Line, because it's a very well-known game. It's very, there's good sort of studies about it, right? Folks know what's good play, what's bad play. Many people have played it many times, and they have a deep understanding of it. In this one, a lot of that goes away. It feels sort of more loosey-goosey. You grab a couple of dice, you roll them, and then you go, well, I'll see what happens. I'm going to put this here, I'm going to put that there, and hope that things go my way. And I like that disarming nature about it. It's not as stressful. You don't feel necessarily, not smart if you don't win this one. And I like that. It's quick, pretty, punchy little filler. One that just doesn't have a lot of ratings online. Doesn't seem like a lot of people know about it, or maybe it's just simply been overlooked because it looks too light or too silly. But if you like Battle Line, or you just generally like Reiner Knizia's 2-player games, and you want something that you can maybe play with the kids, or something that's a little bit lighter, this is a good one. There's a good core underneath it all that drives the whole game forward. So, Los Banditos. Next up, I've got a card game called Basari, the card game. Now, Basari is a game from the late 90s, which was published in a bunch of different places, a bunch of different editions, and it is something of an award-winning game. It's a game in which players are going to be competing over different actions by simultaneously selecting what they intend to do. In that game, there's a board, there are gems, and if 2 people choose the same reward, then they will have to basically bid back and forth as for the privilege of taking that action. And you'll say, I'll give you 2 green gems if you let me be the one to do it. And the person might counter with, well, I'll give you 3 blue gems. And those gems are ranked, and that goes back and forth until someone simply accepts to take the gems and let the other person do the thing they're going to do. That's the board game. But the card game is very, very similar, with a lot fewer components. It's a much more portable game that retains the feel of the original, keeps the few core mechanisms that make it engaging and interesting, while moving at a nicer clip and just sort of, wrapping up the entire package in something that is more palatable, at least for me. I like the original game just fine, but the card game is incredible. You are going to Each player draws a card. On that card are some gems, some number of workers, and then some number of victory points, I think is what it is. And you will select one of those things you want. And you'll reveal your choice. If you're the only one who picked something, you just get that stuff. I want these 4 points. You're the only one who chose points, that's yours. If 2 people chose the same thing, though, then you need to do that gem bargaining. And then if 3 or more people chose it, then no one gets it. Okay? So that's basically it. You are trying to take care that you have the gems you want. You can just choose to take gems if you're running low. I hope nobody else does. You're trying to get victory points. You are trying to just come out ahead. It's a really interesting, clever, sort of condensation. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's a great way to take this larger board game and put it into a deck of cards and lose really very little, if anything, from the original game. So I like it. I don't think this one came out in too many languages. I don't think it has as much of a wide distribution. But if you come across it, definitely give it a try. It's very interactive, very attractive package, and it just plays quickly and cleverly. And I really enjoy it. Basari, the card game. My next pick here is probably the least known games of the games I'm talking about today. And that is a game called Birth, which is, I believe, a Japanese game that's driven by dice. There is a circle in the center broken up into these pie shapes with some dots around some of these, okay? They have different numbers of dots, and then a number printed in that pie wedge. You're going to roll a handful of dice in your own color. The game plays 2 or 3 players, I believe, and that's basically it. And then you are going to, on your turn, play a die. You'll select one, and you're going to move your pawn clockwise on this circle as many spaces as the number of pips. When you are done moving, you will play the die that you triggered into the pie shape at which you're standing. And this continues. There's a couple of other little rules. If you would directly land on somebody else's pawn instead with, say, a 4, instead you move yet again another 4. And eventually you'll be out of all your dice. And then you do some scoring. So the scoring's interesting. You score for 2 different things. Each of the pie shapes has a number printed in it, like I said, and they have, a 2, a 3, a 5, and an 8, I think it is. Each die in there, no matter the pips on it, is worth that many points. So the 8 section is worth 8 victory points for every die you have in there, but there's only one stopping place around it. Whereas the section that has, is worth 2 points, there are 3 or 4 locations in which you have to count and you will easily stop there. But then besides that scoring, there's also a scoring at each of these locations for the majority of pips. If you have the most pips in there, adding all your dice together, you'll score that many points, the number of pips you have in there. Add up those 2 things, and you have yourself a winner. The game is, I think thematically it's meant to be very ethereal. It's meant to be about the sort of the birth of the universe that really doesn't come through. And it really doesn't matter either. It's just not about that. This feels like a traditional game. Something like a backgammon or a parcheesi or something like that. It has those sorts of trappings, but with a really neat scoring system underneath it. There's a little bit of interaction, which is that when you stop somewhere with a die and somebody else has a die in that area that matches yours, so I stop there with a 4 and there's another 4 in there, I can push that 4 out to one of the 2 neighboring pie wedges. So that's clever, and it makes you stop and think, okay, which die do I trigger and where do I land and what do I manage to do with that? Am I going to be winning the majority of pips in that area? The die there will be worth 3 points, but maybe I want to spend a higher die and go into the 5 area. So it's simple. It's certainly a family style game, family weight game, but it manages to be sort of tens in some ways, but very casual also, very attractive, what's there is absolutely the bare minimum of what needs to be there, and I appreciate that about it. So Birth is a cool one. It's a very hard game to get, and And it's, of course, very underappreciated, underrated. Very few people know about it, I think. But it is certainly a good fit for me for this list. And it's one that if you ever find yourself a chance to give it a try, especially very casually with folks that perhaps aren't much, aren't big gamers or anything like that, I would certainly recommend it. So there you go, Birth. My fourth pick here is a game from Michael Schott called Boss Keto, which is a bidding game in which you are trying to collect different cards on the table. You have a bunch of piles and you flip over cards from each. And you'll be bidding on those by playing, well, what else? Bananas. You can play cards when it's your turn. You can play a card. That card is color-coded to one of the piles out there. Or you can play banana tokens. The cards are worth 3 bananas. The tokens are worth 1 only. This happens 4 times around the table with players bidding on various things they'd like to win. Once that's done, you will win those things, put them in front of you, and then we reveal new cards at those piles and we bid again. Once you've emptied those piles, and there's 9 rounds in the game, then you'll check who's got the most of each of the kinds of cards that was collected, okay? Those also have numbers on them. And so if I've got the most 6s, let's say, then I'll get 6 points. Anybody else who has any of those cards will get a point per card. So they get something. They just don't get 6 points. And that's basically it. The main negative here about this game, which seems to be the usual response, is that the game's a little long for what it is. And I think I agree with that. I think the game is a little long for what it is. But it moves along at a nice clip. It's got a couple of very minor special abilities to some of these cards. Like, when you win this one, you get a free banana for bidding next round. That sort of thing. Very minor. It's very attractive. It's well made. There's a nice one-upmanship to backing off of something if you see someone coming in strong, or maybe noticing when no one seems to be going for and trying to, hopefully, going in there and bidding on it, assuming you have the right cards in hand, of course. It just works nicely, and it's sort of a 2-tiered thing. You need to win the cards with the bananas, and then you need to win the majorities with the cards you won with the bananas. That's nice. It's a smooth system. Yes, I wish it was a little bit faster, but I like the look. I like the way it works, and I find it to be an engaging little game. One you sort of want to treat the same way a lot of folks treat trick-taking games, in which you sort of, you don't worry about how long the game is. You just kind of get into a cadence, a rhythm, and the game will probably be longer than it ought to be, but you're enjoying a certain vibe, a certain, again, rhythm and cadence to it. If you can reach that place, that magical place, then I think you're going to have a really good time with this one. Boss Keto is a good one, and from a fantastic designer. So there you go. Speaking of fantastic designers, my last pick here is from Bruno Catala, one of my favorite designers of all time. And this game is called Burdigala. Burdigala here is it's a family-style game in which you are going to be moving around the city, being adjacent to building locations, and then building into those locations by putting a little stone cube onto these different places. And once it has enough cubes to complete the construction of this place, it is completed, points are awarded, and you move on to somewhere else you can ideally go to and continue building around. There are cards in it. Cards will let you take special abilities or set you up for various things. There's certainly luck in it. It's, like I said, a family weight game. But the whole thing has a nice cartoony vibe to it, has a decent amount of things going on in it, and while I could see some folks perhaps writing it off because the game is too lucky or feels somewhat inconsequential, I find it very engaging. I find it very attractive and fun, and it seems incredibly unpretentious, the entire thing. It's sort of, you can feel that the first and foremost consideration was making something that has humor and fun in it, and everything else comes after. And I appreciate those things, We have so many games in this day and age, and so many of them sometimes can't help but come across feeling self-important. This is a game that manages to completely avoid all of that. And is just funny and silly and engaging. So Board de Gala, also a very hard game to find, but one that I certainly would recommend you try out if you ever find yourself near a copy of the game. So that's going to do it for me, everybody. Those are my 5 unsung gems for today with the letter B. Like I said in the intro, let me know down below what you think. If you've played any of these, what did you think of them? And that's going to do it. I will see you on the next one. My name is Zee Garcia. Have a great day.